Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti-centered podcast where we talk about spiritual subject matters, and we talk about how to bring them into our daily life and how to apply them practically. And we are here with a wonderful live studio audience from all over the world: Brazil, the West Coast, Florida, Washington State, I think, right? Pasha and Lane.
That's that. West Coast, East Coast.
And from Queens, New York, Achyuta Gopi is here, my trusty co-host. Our tri-host, Dayal Garanga, is still missing in action, but we just got word from him that he will be joining us. I feel like he's like a special guest now because it's been a while. He's going to be joining us on Thursday just for a day. And then hopefully next week regularly. And I was saying that we're very eagerly waiting his association to hear. I said specifically, we want to hear about his realizations serving so closely with our Guru Radhanath Swami, all three of our Gurus, Radhanath Swami. And because that's where he's been, just in case anyone's been wondering where he's been.
He hasn't just been flaking out.
He hasn't just been flaky. Radhanath Swami has been here. He just left yesterday, actually. And so Dayal has kind of been taking on that seva of like just being the personal assistant, go-to person while Maharaj has been here. So it's been intense for anyone that's ever done that. I've never done that seva, but for anyone that's ever done that seva, I know that it's like super intense. You just have to be like on, you have to be there when you're supposed to be there, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 9 p.m., 11 p.m., doesn't matter. You just have to be there.
Yeah. I don't envy that person, but I can say that he's done it with such grace more than anybody I've ever been in contact with. He's just been so graceful about it and so upbeat about it, with such a good mood about it.
Yeah.
Consistently, that sometimes I'm looking at Dayal like, are you a normal human?
That's the story of my life. I'm like, Dayal, are you like normal?
Are you
Like he's
normal?
literally texting me, being like, Kishore, are you okay? I just want to make sure that you feel supported during this time because I know it's intense that Maharaj is here. I'm like, why are you texting me? Like, you're the one who's like waking up at like 4 in the morning every day going to get Maharaj. So yeah, he's like on a whole different plane. So I'm excited to hear about his realizations on Thursday,
He's
which
such
is
a good
tomorrow.
person for that service. Yeah, just tomorrow.
Okay, tomorrow. I'm confused about the days. But we are going to continue our topics and our conversations. We left off on really interesting places. We've been talking about the dichotomy of devotee versus non-devotee, whether or not that's a useful dichotomy or not. We've been talking about having hope in material situations. We left off yesterday kind of like the institution versus just like my spiritual journey. And I'd like to maybe open it up with this idea because I really like this. You said this just before we started, Achyuta, about, devotee versus non-devotee, this dichotomy. And the more and more we talk about it, the more and more I realize that what we are talking about is that what we're talking about is spiritual life. And spiritual life is life. Like life is spiritual. And I think the more and more that we talk about it, the more I realize like there is no dichotomy actually. Like life is spiritual, right? This whole world is spiritual. Krishna has a domain over all of this world, or your higher power, whatever word you want to use, name you want to use. And I think really these classifications of devotee versus non-devotee or spiritualist versus non-spiritualist is simply we utilize them so that we can put people in a category, which is sometimes useful, of like, this is a person who's taking spirituality or life seriously, right? Like they're taking spirituality or life seriously. They're doing practices, they're doing disciplines, they're doing etc. And I think that if that's the definition, then that's really interesting because that starts to break down some of the dichotomy. Because as we were spilling the tea yesterday, there are a lot of quote unquote people who say that they're spiritualists or who say that they're devotees. They might not be taking their spiritual life so seriously, right? And so I think that that's really interesting because we've broken it down to look at like this word that we use, devotee or spiritualist. Sometimes it can get, let's use like a fancy term, sometimes it can get like co-opted into just like the performance of a devotee, right? That's what we were talking about yesterday, or the performance of a spiritualist, or this is what the box looks like, you know, put on the tilak, put on the dhoti, and now I'm spiritual, right? And it's like, well, what does being spiritual actually mean? Or I follow all the things that the institutions are telling me to do, so now I'm spiritual, you know? It's like, I don't know about that, right? So, that's kind of where my head is at. What's up, Achita?
Yeah, I feel all of that. And I feel like I want to also add to it, not only are we putting these categories in these boxes so that we can look at, okay, this is a spiritual person, there's a non-spiritual person. But then also what we do is we attach our own well-being to that. Spiritual people are safe, non-spiritual people are not safe. We are looking, am I safe here or am I not safe here? And the problem is when we toss everybody who is spiritual into that box of, and I'm safe here. No, you are not. And that's often a hard truth to come to, that just because someone is chanting Hare Krishna does not make them safe. And just because someone has no idea who Krishna is does not make them unsafe.
Mm, mm,
We've got to really take into consideration what the character is of this person's life, and stop putting it in these snap decisions, these snap judgments where, okay, I've made my decision, my mind says this and my mind says that, and that's where we're going, and that's where my judgment stays, and everybody there is going to be safe.
mm,
We've seen it in so many situations where they, but I thought I was with devotees, I thought I was going to be safe, and it's like, you were with people.
mm,
Even, Srila Prabhupada says in the ninth chapter that there will be loads of people who are Krishna conscious, but still don't have faith in Krishna.
mm, mm,
On the conversely, there are loads of people who may not ascribe to being Krishna conscious, but they might have the most faith in God you've ever seen.
mm, mm, mm. I was listening to a lecture a few weeks ago, and Maharaj was talking about it recently, actually, because when we had a meeting, we had many meetings with Maharaj, but one was like there's a leadership team that leads Bhakti Center, and so we were meeting with Maharaj, and I was speaking to him about like the yoga studio and how we, our plans for the yoga studio and etc. And his first thing was like, we need to bring back those yoga for 12-step recovery classes. And that used to be so wonderful and this and etc. And we let him know that they're happening. And he was so happy. And he was like, you should keep on doing this, and you should build it up more. And I remember I heard a lecture from him, like an old lecture. And I said this to him. I was like, I was listening to one of your lectures and this is what you said. And he was like, I said that? I was like, yes. And he was like, wow, amazing. And what he said was, this was like in early 1990s. And apparently he was giving, this was in Mumbai, and he was giving a lecture to people who were in 12-step recovery program, like alcoholics. And in person, he was mentioning that he would be asked a lot of times to actually go and speak to these programs. But then in the lecture, towards the end of the lecture, someone was asking him a question. And basically he said that people that he has met in this 12-step recovery program are some of the most spiritual people with some of the most amount of faith that he's ever met in his life. And that sometimes they have even more faith and they are even more surrendered than devotees. I'm doing air quotes for those of you that are listening and can't see me. Devotees. And that's super interesting, right? It's like, hmm, hmm.
Yeah, because in our minds, we've decided, oh, well, you've done this, or you've made life mistakes, or you've made these life choices, and then you go on and you do whatever. Unfortunate story, there was an artist who is Krishna conscious, and they would draw beautiful things. And then one day, they just started making art about people who were alcoholics.
Hmm.
But the captions were so disparaging. Like, this material world is such that you all choose Maya, and then you go and you get drunk and you're not even enjoying and all this stuff, but this is what you've chosen. And in the comments, there was a devotee, and he said, well, I'm a devotee, but I used to be an alcoholic, and I can tell you, this is not what it was like. It wasn't like I was in control of every choice. I was not in control of myself. And the artist was saying, they were like, look, everybody makes choices, and you had a choice, and you made the wrong one, and all this stuff. And I was just looking at this going, this is so unfortunate
Mm,
that you are now wielding your God-given gift to bash people over the head and judge them unnecessarily.
mm,
What I find with people who have been through anything like that, because it is a disease, is that they're surrendered.
mm,
They know something about surrender, and it would behoove us to learn it from them.
mm, mm,
If you have not gone through anything, there's that surrender is an idea. It
mm,
is a theory. When you have gone and hit rock bottom and had to claw your way back up, surrender is no longer a theory. Surrender is an actuality. It is an action, and that surrender is a choice. You were thrown into a material world situation where the ties were binding you too tightly, and the choice that you made was to surrender. That, I think, is brave and applaudable and incredibly honest and vulnerable. And every day you have to make that choice to surrender again. That is an active thing that people are now looking in the face. Do I surrender, or do I go back to the old habits? So sometimes I agree. They are some of the most spiritual people I've ever met because they know something about surrender. They know this is way bigger than me. I can't do this on my own. And there's so much about the 12-step program that is about surrender. And it is so important for us to all look at it because we are all recovering from something.
mm, mm,
Even if it's a past life that we don't remember, we're all recovering.
mm. Yeah. Martha is saying, it is sad that our faith grows stronger in times of need, and as soon as things are better, that faith starts to vanish. This is how we are until we understand faith should not be conditional, but constant.
Ooh, I have a story about that.
Go for it.
I was talking to Radhanath Maharaj, and he was talking about this idea of faith in times of need and struggles and all these things. And he said, Prahlad lived thousands of years, thousands of years. The story of Prahlad is a few months when he was 5. He's like the whole focus of Bhagavatam and the story of Prahlad is a few months when he was 5 and his father tried to kill him. He said all of the great personalities that we derive our sense of our source of strength in spiritual times from, it's all about the struggle parts of their lives. We don't hear about and they were a great king and they lived a cushy life and all that. We don't hear about any of that. You get like one verse and a couple of lines, and the rest of the crux of the stories are about how they got through their adversities, because this is the material world. The adversities are going to happen. But the adversities also mark us as, okay, now the relationship is being tested. I had a friend who was in a relationship, still is in a relationship. And she was saying, she's like, people used to ask me for relationship advice because we looked really happy. She's like, and I never knew what to say because I felt like we hadn't really gone through anything. She's like, and then I felt like we had a really serious fight, like a really serious disagreement, like one of those ones that rocks the foundation of the relationship. And she said, now part of me was thinking, I'm really sad to be going through this. And then another part of me was thinking, well, at least I've actually been through something now. Now my advice has some weight to it. And I was thinking, I was like, you're crazy, but great, but crazy, but yes, I see where you're coming from, but okay. But that's how it is with us in our spirituality, or us that with anything that means something in our lives. For it to have weight, we are going to go through things. And up until that point, we don't even understand anybody else's point of view. Our reality is so far removed. Everything's fine. This happens this way. This happens that way. And I've told my friends, I'm like, there's a different reality. There's a different ISKCON. There is a different USA for you than there is for me.
Mm-hmm.
But until we go through things, we don't even realize it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that going through thing is not the hallmark that God hates you. The going through things is what happens. And after you come out the other side is the hallmark of God saying, okay, now our relationship is stronger.
Mm. Since we were talking so much about Radhanath Swami, I read this little quote on his Instagram that he doesn't run. Radhanath Swami,
He's so not.
his our God brothers and God sisters, they run it for him and they post and stuff. But this is a quote from him, and he says, "Every time you are passing the test, you are coming closer to God." And I really, really love that, because it's like, yeah, God, like what you just said, Achyuta, was such gold. It's like the material situations and the material sometimes chaos that we go through. It's like God isn't necessarily like mad at us or this, or it's like people have this mentality of like, and it's a very like prosperity gospel type of mentality, very Judeo-Christian, of just like, you know, this bad stuff is happening to me, therefore I must be bad, right? And if good stuff isn't happening to me, that means I must be bad. If good stuff is happening to me, that means I must be good. And it's like, that's
Well,
a
not just Judeo-Christian, because if you look at the way karma was preached,
karma.
do good and good will happen. Do bad and bad will happen. So now that the bad things are happening, you must be a horrible person.
It must be wrong with you. Yeah, yeah. The whole karma kanda section of the Vedas is also like that. This equation, kind of like results oriented,
Mm-hmm.
performance oriented. I hate all these corporate words, by the way. Whenever people try to throw corporate language at me, I'm just like, nope, we are not doing performance reviews. That's
Yeah,
not,
yeah, yeah.
not
Right. Yeah.
but yeah, it's like people still have that like deeply ingrained in their psyche, in their being, of like, things aren't going my way, that must mean I'm bad, that must mean I'm like, you know, an evil person, or God doesn't love me or something like that. And it's like, no, like, and you've said it so many times, it's like, and this is like part of the basis of our philosophy, it's like this material world that we live in is a unreal temporary place, and our bodies are temporary, our minds are temporary, all of this is temporary, and there's something deeper that connects each and every single one of us, which is the soul. And that soul has been through so much, and basically like we're just trying to get closer to God, we're trying to get closer to Krishna, we're trying to get closer to that spiritual world. And God, Krishna, is kind of helping us through these adversities in which we're able to get closer to him. And I kind of like the point of your friend, even though I could totally get it, like, yeah, you're crazy, like what are you doing, you know? But it's like, yeah, when you've been through some stuff, whether it be in personal relationships or career, or like whatever, you know, whatever struggles that you've been through, that's when that like, that's when you realize that you can't do it alone.
Yeah.
That's when you realize like, I need help, like this is bigger than me, you know, this intense suffering is bigger than me, and I need to surrender, you know. And I love that you were saying about the 12 people in the 12-step program. It's like they're really actioning surrender, like they're like, whoa, okay, this is way too big for me, I need to ask for help from my higher power. That's kind of like the language they use. And therefore, like, please help me, you know, as opposed to like this mentality, and you know, this mentality of like modern day mentality, like, and it's very Western, right? It's very like capitalist, you know, America, of just like dog eat dog world, I can do it on my own, you know, like each man for his own, you know. And it's this mistaken mentality that makes us believe that we don't need people, we don't need society, we don't need friends, like we don't need community, you know. Like if you look at the way like modern life is set up, especially at big cities, it's kind of scary. It's like, it's really the death of community. Like people don't know each other. You know, you go to New York City neighborhoods and it's like, if someone talks to someone, it's like, why are you talking to them? like I don't know you, you know. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's some neighborhoods that are still a little bit, but it's really like go home to your little thing and watch the TV, and like that's what you got to do, you know. And it's like when we look at spiritual, not all spiritual communities, when we look at the idea of community, or the most ideal version of community, let's put it that way, like really we're supposed to be helping each other, like we're supposed to be in community, we're supposed to be helping each other move through those adversities so that we get closer to God, so that we have a deeper and more personal relationship with him, so that we can get out of the material world.
Yeah, and to that end, like I remember I had one of my friends used to ask me, they're like, "Oh, so, have you spoken to your neighbors? Like, how are they doing? Like all this stuff." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I don't talk to my neighbors. What are you saying? I live in an apartment building. I don't talk to any of these people. Like sometimes I'll see them and then I'll say hi on the way because we're polite, whatever. I'm not talking to them." And I was just like, "Why you keep asking me this? Like, stop being weird. I'm in New York. I'm not talking to all these people." And then I got to Vrindavan, you talk to everybody, like the random pizza delivery guy. Like you start to make friends with the door watchman, and then you start to make friends with the one rickshaw who's consistently out there, who will take you wherever you need to go. And then you start making friends with the one guy who has the shop right across the street, and everybody knows them, and everybody knows you now. And it was only for 10 days, but I started like feeling like, oh, maybe I should go somewhere on the rickshaw today just because the guy's so nice every day, you
Mm,
know? And then, I came back to New York and I was like, I'm not talking to these people. I'm not getting to know them. No. But yeah, that's exactly it. This idea of community
mm,
is so different, especially in this city, in this pace of life. It is so different. And just like that, when you get somebody spiritual who's like, well, are you doing this? Are you chanting? How are you feeling? How am I? Like, no, I'm just trying to get through the day and do my prescribed spiritual activities. I'm not relishing it. What are you saying? And they're coming from a different community and a different reality where they are accessing that grace of God. They're actually relishing. They have moved past the point of I'm just trying to make it through this day. Gosh, what is your issue? And they're not. They're in a totally different place.
mm,
And when you get to that place and you start seeing that community and you start seeing that spiritual atmosphere, then we get what like Anna's saying, which is like when you're going through really tough times. She's talking about leukemia and she's saying that this is what spiritual teachers told her in hard times with leukemia, and that it is truly a blessing to be tested
mm,
and a bath of mercy afterward.
mm, mm,
And I'm like, this is a person who's gone through things. And what I find is that people who have gone through things, even if it doesn't turn out the way I think the good, in air quotes, turnout would be, they always wind up saying, but I feel protected.
mm,
I feel God's grace.
mm,
Okay, I'm sold.
mm. Sign me up.
Yeah, because the bad times are going to happen whether I want them to or not. It's not like, oh, if I don't surrender, then I don't have to go through hard times.
Mm,
Kunti, we quote that verse often, let the calamities come again and again. And I always thought, yeah, that's crazy. I'm not saying that. But it's not like not saying that didn't stop the calamities from coming.
mhm,
It's not like I could just run away from it like it doesn't exist. They're coming either way. So better that I develop a way to handle it. Better that I develop my 12-step program
mm,
so that I have a way to surrender and a method to do it when the hard times and calamities come, because they're coming.
mm. Yeah, and we're almost out of time. And I wanted to say one thing. I forgot to say it at the beginning, because I think that we've been talking about this devotee non-devotee thing, or spiritualist non-spiritualist thing, and we've talked about this so much on the podcast before about how like everyone is suffering, right? This material world is a place of suffering. Everyone is suffering, and we, as devotees, as people who are trying to be devotees, as people who are trying to be bhaktas of Krishna, we're trying to deal with our suffering in one way, which is surrender, and surrendering to Krishna and offering it to him, and trying to see the good in it, and trying to see that it's a blessing. As Anna, thank you so much for so vulnerably sharing. And I think really what I'm trying to say is that everyone is trying to deal with their suffering. and they might be using methods that, like, whatever, like they might be doing some stuff that, like, we in our, you know, divisive black white devotee non-devotee this mind might be like, oh, that's bad, and I really loved Achyuta. This is why I was going to mention it, because you brought up this person, this devotee who was painting, and then said this about the alcoholics, and it's like that divisive mind, especially when you start practicing spirituality, it can get to a place where you start to look at others and you're like, oh, something's wrong with them, or like they're evil, or they're miscreants, or they're just like lowly people, or like whatever language that that people use, right? And it's like, and I'm saying that from personal experience too, because I went through this, in Hare Krishna circles we call it PDS. It's called pure devotee syndrome. And I remember when I first moved into the ashram, I definitely went through that. It didn't last long. It was just like a month or two. But yeah, there's this mood of just like getting a little bit on a high horse of just like, I know the truth now. I'm Krishna's devotee, and you all are.
I'm woke, okay?
I'm really woke. I'm not fake woke. I'm like actually woke. And it's like you look at the other people like, oh God, I can't believe them and this. And it's like, come on, like,
Yeah.
especially if you weren't born into devotee families, it's like we all used to do that. And it's like, why did we used to do it? Because everyone is suffering. Everyone is suffering. And it's like, we can't, at least something I've learned through my time, it's like, we can't be judging people for what they're doing to cope with their suffering, because that judgment of people, what they're doing for coping, that's actually a very uncompassionate act. It's actually like really, really a disservice to both the person and to me in my spiritual life. One of the main instructions from Sri Chaitanya is to be humble and to not expect any respect from others and give respect to everyone,
Not not to mention the tolerant part.
the tolerant part. Like, it's like,
Tolerant doesn't just mean being tolerant of your superiors.
yeah, yeah, tolerant of your surroundings, tolerant of this material world, tolerant of everything. It's just like, we could keep on going with this topic forever. I love that Pasha wrote #woke wars.
Yeah. The last line I will say is that me and my family, we bring up the one line at all times, and especially when we catch ourselves getting into that judgment zone of this person is doing this and that's just wrong. I can't believe there's such nonsense and all whatever.
Mm,
There, but for the grace of God, go I.
mm,
Which is basically just fancy for that could be me tomorrow.
yeah, exactly.
Whatever it is you think that they're doing could be me tomorrow. Except for the grace of God. So there, but for the grace of God go I, because without the grace of Govind, like straight up tomorrow, who knows?
100%. We also need that on a shirt.
Right?
Also need that on a shirt. Yeah, I always talk about this with Jai Jagannath, and this is a whole nother conversation. This is a whole nother podcast. But I always talk about it with him because, it's Pride Month or whatever. And I have a lot of opinions about it. But
So does he.
so does he. And he was reading a book recently called Velvet Rage, which I really want to read. And basically, he was telling me that it's about how a culture, because predominant gay, especially male culture, is very like rooted in like sense enjoyment and drugs and partying and all this kind of stuff and promiscuity. And he was saying that the author of the book was saying that a lot of that comes from shame. A lot of that comes from like deep rooted trauma and shame. But anyway, that's a whole nother podcast. But the reason I brought it up is because I always joke with him, but not really joke. I'm just like, if it wasn't for Krishna and if it wasn't for the devotees, I'd be like, I don't know, on the floor, like half past, it would be bad. It would not be a good situation. And it's like, that's a very humbling thought, like feeling to have. And I feel like that's what should be in our minds, not like, I'm so much better than everyone, or I finally made it and look at all these nonsense people. It's like, no, no, no. It's like that constant reminder that Maya is dangerous, right? Srila
Yeah.
Prabhupada would tell his disciples, that the biggest problem that they had was that they weren't afraid enough of Maya, illusion.
Yeah, sufficiently afraid enough.
So it's like we need those daily reminders. We need to give ourselves those daily reminders of like, yes, illusion can get me at any time. I could be that person at any time. And so therefore let me be grateful that I'm here. I have Krishna in my heart, and period, full stop. I don't need to go judging people, devotee, non-devotee. This is a great conversation. Okay, we're fresh out of time. Kimberly, please give us your takeaways. And if anyone else has takeaways, please put them in the chat.
Thank you. So today we're taking away to stop making snap judgments. We're all recovering from something, so we shouldn't judge each other for the things we do to cope with our suffering. And then adversities are going to happen. Every time we pass the tests, we become closer to God, which actually makes the adversity a great blessing.
I don't know if anybody really caught what she did just there, but there was an idea from the very beginning, and then a line that we just said, and then she pieced the two together, which I'm like, are you taking these notes in real time?
She is.
Together and then synthesizing them. You are like an awesome DJ.
Thank you, Kimberly, for that. Yes, she is synthesizing them in real time.
Okay, like,
Any final takeaways, Achyuta?
I'm impressed with Kimberly. I just,
That's a great
you
take.
know, that yeah, I am really, that level of just really active listening, because that's what active listening really means for me. Not just like I've repeated everything you said in this like whooshy kind of way. But no, she's like actively listening and really taking good points. And so I wanna listen to the people around me.
Yes, yes. And I will just say thank you so much, Anna, for opening up and sharing that with
Wow.
us, because that was like, that really puts it into perspective. Like we can say, oh, suffering and this and whatever in
Mm-hmm.
the world. And it's like, but it's like when these super real, intense experiences come, and to know that you're still like, yeah, it was a blessing, like that's so humbling and so like, wow, it helps everyone who's listening to this podcast. So thank you so much for vulnerably sharing.
And
Thank
thank you for continuing to choose.
you.
Thanks for choosing
Mm,
spiritual life, all the above.
mm.
Round of applause for you.
Thank you all so much for your beautiful presence. Martha, Irenka, Kimberly, Lileshwari, Anna, Himalata, Lane, Pasha, Dana, Rini, and Lexi. Thank you all so much in the live studio audience. Everyone who's listening on any other platform, thank you. Please keep on listening. We're here every day. Thank you, Achyuta, and we'll be here tomorrow, hopefully with our tri-host, Dayal Gurunga, and we'll get stories from his service with Radhanath Swami.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.